This past week I was sitting in meditation and I was asking, what shall I speak to? Because the thoughts and the inspiration come on a weekly basis, and I saw within my own inner eye or inner vision a huge tree, a beautiful, great big tree. And then the words came, tell the story, tell the story. And I asked more about this tree, and I really got it that the tree is a symbol of life itself, and that each branch, each part of that tree was one of the world's religions, all connected to a singular truth of life. And that each faith tradition in the world is saying one singular thing: God is. God is. In this North American life that we live, the predominant faith tradition has been the Judeo-Christian faith tradition, even though there are many among us now that bring different foliage and branches to what it is that life is. And I was just looking at some of those, Hinduism and Buddhism, and the indigenous teachings of the world, and the teachings of Africa and Mesoamerica. And all of these are part of the great tree of life. And I was thinking about the Judeo-Christian tradition, and that how there is, in some ways, a lot of healing to be done around the messages that have been given through the Judeo-Christian tradition. And another thing that occurred with me in prayer was this whole structure of the 10 Commandments. And I'm not going to bring those all up. But what I am going to say is that those 10 Commandments have shifted a bit in their meaning. Now I kind of see them as 10 guidelines. And that's not watering them down. But it comes out of a birthing or a continual unfoldment of our concept of God. That God isn't an old tribal God that is filled with judgment, but a soft and loving, endearing presence. And that's where the guidelines come in. And one of those guidelines that I would like to look at just a little bit today, briefly, is to not bear false witness. And that could be interpreted on the surface as, well, don't tell a lie about your neighbor, or don't say something that is going to be a challenge for somebody else. But what I would like to shine a little light on this, not bear false witness, is that it's to be not in a witnessing capacity of seeing the world in a way that's false. That we are working in consciousness to have a reappraisal of what it is that we are looking at as spiritual truth students on our own path. Whether or not you are, it doesn't matter what branch you are on in the great tree of life, that there is a universal truth of inquiry as to what it is that we are witnessing. And then I kind of went with A Course in Miracles, that to some people doesn't really work as a faith tradition, and then for other people it works really well. But the inquiry is, nothing I see is real. And some people have a real hard time with that. Nothing I see is real because, we're dealing in the nuts and bolts of being in the physical world. So what is real? But to get back to the question, not to bear false witness. And that through meditation and through prayer and through spiritual inquiry, we are improving our vision of what it is that we are witnessing. So generally in spirituality, in this process that you and I are involved in, there is this unveiling of what it is that's real, what it is that's arising in consciousness. And yesterday, and I'm going to talk more about this in a couple, 3 weeks, but yesterday there was a board retreat that we had together. And we had a conversation about what are we becoming? What wants to be born in this faith community? And that in a way, New Thought has been all about shifting our ability to witness in our lives to basically get what we want and to demonstrate the good that God has for us. But then there is this other piece that's about going deeper into the self and mining that and finding out what it is. And over the years, over the centuries, and I would assert that in this place right now, things that I'm addressing or talking about could not even really be talked about 100 years ago, that it would be heresy to do so. And I remember a man who had a t-shirt that I saw at a retreat one time, and it said, "Born Again Heretic." And I said, where can I get one of those shirts? Because in the old tradition of the world, being a heretic is operating outside of the official canon of religiosity. And that you and I are taking those steps to do that very thing. But in the world of the past, covering certain areas of going deeper just simply wasn't allowed. It was heresy. And so sacred stories within the tree of life, within these branches of being, weren't necessarily even talked about. But within this faith tradition, of which I have been a part for over 40 years now, there is the freedom to speak to what it is that we are as spiritual beings. And years ago, there were stories, movies that were, there was the story, there was the cover story, and then there was the background story. And one of those stories, which may seem somewhat childlike to you because you saw it when you were a child, was The Wizard of Oz. That is an archetypal story, if you have ever felt into that. So here's this innocent person that finds herself in a new land. And she's off to see the wizard. She's off on an adventure, which is really the hero's journey. And she meets parts of herself along the way. She meets the mind, which is hung up, or the heart, that is rusted, or that part of us that is afraid, that doesn't have the courage to meet life's demands. And then there is this agreement, this integration of these pieces of self that are off to see the wizard on the hero's journey. And there are dangers, and there are passages, and there are wild monkeys, which are those thoughts that try to carry us away from our mission. And that there's even a falling asleep at the very almost entrance of the Emerald City, which is the self. And so you and I are on this journey together. And there's a part of us, a higher vibrational part of us, that says to us, we had it all the time. That our ruby slippers were, and feet, by the way, are a symbol of understanding. We had the understanding all the time. And the yellow brick road, the yellow is a symbol for illumination. So we're walking this path, rediscovering who it is that we are. And all of this seemingly childish story has great metaphysical meaning for us. And this is how the Spirit works within human consciousness. It finds a way. God is sneaky in a good way. And then there was another story that came to mind this week. Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, that was written in 1863. Another archetypal story. And he's writing this metaphor telling us that just below the surface of our thinking, there isn't this seething of emotion, but there are great expanses of adventure, great expanses of self within. That there is a sun within, just below the surface. So the journey to the center of the earth is the journey to the center of our earth, our self. Because you and I function on the level, most of the time, on personality. And then there is this invitation to go deeper into soul. And then invitation to go even deeper into self, which is the spirit, the self, the eternal, that is the truth of being. And then about 100 years later, there's another story. A young man attending Berkeley in California is starting to have these feelings, and he has a very active imagination. And no doubt he's attending certain classes, philosophical classes on Taoism. His name's George Lucas. And he starts to intuit a feeling of the Force. That there's an animating principle and power behind all of physicality, and that it is ours to link into the Force. And there's the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force. Well, in Unity faith tradition, there really isn't too much focus on the dark side of the Force, is there? We focus a lot on the light. But the dark side is really the inertia of human will. And so there is this process of maturation that's going on within these sacred stories. Luke is looking for his father. He's looking for his home. Same as Dorothy. There's no place like home. Jules Verne is talking about going to the center of the earth, the center of the self. And you might say, well, okay, well, so what? Well, the so what is, well, how do we practice this? How do we find our way home? How do we increase our understanding? Well, the pointers there are to integrate the mind and the heart and the feeling nature into being integrated and one. And to be in realization that we had it all along. There's another woman. This isn't necessarily an archetypal story, but there was archetypal forces involved in her life. And archetypal really means that there are divine imprints within consciousness that are working within us to come out and to come forth. And that this young woman felt this movement within her to be of service in India. You may know who I'm speaking of. And metaphysically, you could almost look at her journey as the feminine linking up with the Christ self, even though it is what she wanted to do was to have a marriage, a sacred marriage with Jesus and to do her work. This is Mother Teresa. So in these archetypal stories, there is always this question: how do we earth spiritual energy into our lives? And I remember her writing this at one time. And this is an integration of mind, of heart, and courage. Mother Teresa. People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you're kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten. Do good anyway. Give the best you have, and it will never be enough. Give your best anyway. Because in the final analysis, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. I read once in the letters of Mother Teresa that she, for over 50 years, never had a direct experience of oneness with the divine. But she went ahead and did it anyway. So this gets back to our own life experiences. no matter where we are on the yellow brick road, no matter where we are on the journey to our own center of our own earth. The invitation is to do it anyway, to be, to flower. And how do we do it? To bear fruit through our connection with this tree of life. So I'd invite you for just a moment to visualize your own tree of life, your own inner aliveness. What wants to be born on the branches of your life experience? Have you been holding back? Are you, or am I, allowing it to come forth? Beloved Spirit, we are grateful that you move within us as an essence to prompt us to be on purpose in the flowering of our own lives. I just invite you in this moment to just feel into that for you. Are you rooted in your own life experience? Are your branches reaching up into the light? And just give thanks in this moment for the unfoldment of your life experience. Thank you, God. Amen.